The cold winds of the alien planet howled through the night, carrying with them the heavy scent of metal and dust. It was a place where darkness never seemed to end, where the stars barely shone through the thick clouds, and where danger lurked at every corner. The planet's surface was rough and barren, a wasteland of broken cities and abandoned ruins. Amongst this desolate land, a figure stumbled forward. She was an alien, her body thin and covered in a strange, glowing energy. Her skin shimmered with faint blues and purples, a sign of her race's unique abilities. Yet, despite her otherworldly appearance, she looked weak, her movements slow and shaky. She had been through something terrible, something that had drained her strength. Her name was Lyra, and she had once been a high-ranking officer in her world's most powerful military faction. She had been a leader, someone trusted by her people, but now she was alone, betrayed, and abandoned. Lyra's chains rattled as she moved, the sound sharp and painful. Her wrists were bound tightly to cold metal cuffs, and her feet were shackled. Her long, dark hair fell over her face, hiding the pain in her eyes. She had been dragged through the harsh terrain for miles, her captors showing no mercy as they pulled her toward the old train tracks. The moonlight glinted off the rusted rails, creating an eerie reflection on the ground. It was here, on these tracks, that Lyra's life was about to take a deadly turn. She remembered the events that led to her current situation. She had once been proud of her accomplishments. She had led missions for her government, fought in battles, and earned the respect of her people. But that had all changed when she uncovered a terrible secret. Her government was planning something horrific. They were preparing to invade neighboring planets, destroy entire civilizations, and conquer anyone in their path. Lyra had tried to stop them. She had spoken out, warning her people of the dangers of war and the endless destruction that would follow. But instead of listening to her, her superiors had labeled her a traitor. They had framed her for crimes she didn't commit, accusing her of being a spy for enemy forces. And just like that, the woman who had once been trusted with so much was thrown away, discarded like trash. Her once proud military uniform was now torn, her body battered and broken. They had chained her to these tracks as a final insult, an execution, a slow death beneath the wheels of a speeding train. The wind grew colder as the sound of the train grew louder in the distance. Lyra's heart raced. The train was coming. She had only moments left to live. She tried to lift her head, but the pain in her body was too much. Her strength was fading, and with each passing second, she felt herself slipping closer to the edge of unconsciousness. The glowing energy that had once pulsed brightly through her veins was now dimming, flickering like a dying star. But something inside her refused to give up. She wasn't ready to die. Not like this. She had spent so many years fighting for peace, for a better future. She couldn't just let it all end in the darkness of this forsaken place. The sound of the train grew louder, the rumbling of the tracks vibrating beneath her. Lyra's mind raced, but her body couldn't keep up. She couldn't move. The chains were too tight. The train was too close. Why? She whispered to herself. Why did they do this to me? In her last moments, Lyra's thoughts turned to her people. She had always believed in the good of her world, but now she saw the truth. They had used her, betrayed her, and left her to die. The people she had trusted, the ones she had fought to protect, had turned their backs on her. The train was now almost upon her. She could hear the screech of its metal wheels, the whistle of its horn, as it charged toward the tracks with terrifying speed. There was no way she could escape in time. The cold, hard metal of the train's wheels would crush her in an instant. Just as she closed her eyes, ready to accept her fate, she heard a sound. A faint rustling like footsteps on gravel. Lyra's mind was too foggy to understand what it was. Could it be another of her captors coming to finish the job? Or was it something else, someone else? She barely had time to think before she felt a sharp tug on her chains. A hand gripped her wrists, and with surprising strength, the chains were torn off. She gasped in disbelief, blinking her eyes open. Standing before her was a human, A man, tall and strong, with a determined look in his eyes. He wasn't like the soldiers who had captured her. This man, this stranger had come to her rescue. He didn't say anything at first. He just pulled her away from the tracks, lifting her in his arms and carrying her to safety. The train roared past, its massive wheels only inches away from where she had been moments before. For the first time since she had been betrayed, Lyra felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. She didn't know who this man was, or why he had saved her, but she knew one thing for sure. Her story wasn't over yet. The cold night air still clung to the planet as Jack walked along the old train tracks. He wasn't looking for trouble. In fact, he was looking for peace, something that had been elusive to him for years. Life on this barren world had always been a struggle for Jack. He had come to this planet hoping for a fresh start, but so far, things hadn't gone as planned. The small colony where he lived was a mix of humans and a few alien species, trying to make a living in a place where hope was often in short supply. Jack, however, preferred to stay to himself, working odd jobs just to survive. He had never believed in heroics or grand gestures, but that night, as he walked alone down the tracks, he had no idea that fate was about to change everything for him. He noticed it before he heard it, the faint glow in the distance. It wasn't normal. The planet's moon gave little light, and the only other sources of light were the lights from the nearby colony, flickering far off in the horizon. This glow was different, strange and unnatural, almost like a firefly, but much larger. It was too bright to be just a trick of his tired eyes. Curiosity pulled him forward, and as he approached the source of the light, his heart skipped a beat. Lying on the tracks, barely moving, was a figure. A woman, her skin glowing faintly like something out of a dream. The soft light was coming from her body, and Jack instinctively felt a surge of concern. She was in trouble. Bad trouble. He had never seen anyone like her before. She wasn't human. Her skin shimmered with hues of purple and blue, and her features, though faintly humanoid, were unmistakably alien. Her long hair flowed around her face, tangled and dirty, and her body was thin, almost frail-looking. The chains around her wrists and ankles were heavy and rusted, and they clinked as she stirred. Jack's instincts kicked in. Without thinking, he rushed forward, dropping to his knees beside her. The moment his hand touched her wrist, she flinched, her eyes snapping open, in alarm. For a moment they locked eyes, and Jack felt a chill run down his spine. Her eyes were a brilliant shade of green, glowing with the intensity of a star. "Who are you?" she gasped, her voice barely a whisper. Jack froze for a moment, unsure of what to say. He didn't know who this alien woman was or why she was here. He had no answers. But something about her voice, something in her desperate gaze, told him she wasn't a threat. "I'm Jack," he finally said, his voice low. "What are you doing here? Are you okay?" She barely seemed to hear him. Instead, her gaze shifted toward the distant sound of an approaching train. Panic flooded her face. "No time," she muttered, her voice shaking. "They'll be here soon. You have to help me." Jack's mind raced. He glanced back down the tracks. The train was coming, its light growing stronger by the second. He couldn't think. There was no time to ask questions. He needed to act. Without hesitation, he grabbed her chains, trying to unfasten them, but they were stubborn. Rust had eaten away at the metal, and Jack's hands slipped with the effort. The woman's breathing grew frantic. "Please," she whispered, "before it's too late." The train's horn echoed in the distance. Jack gritted his teeth, his hands working faster. There was no way he was going to let this woman die here. Not like this. She didn't deserve to be left behind on these tracks, abandoned like some broken machine. With a final tug, he managed to break one of the chains. The woman's wrist was free, but the other chain was still locked tight. Jack pulled her into his arms, feeling her tremble in his grip. She weighed nothing, fragile as if every breath could be her last. Her eyes fluttered again, and she whispered, "You shouldn't have helped me. You have no idea who I am." Jack didn't respond. He wasn't thinking about who she was. He was thinking about saving her. They had only moments left. He heard the train now, its roar deafening as it sped closer, a giant steel beast barreling toward them. Jack's pulse raced, and he looked around frantically for any way out. The tracks were narrow, and there was no time to move her to safety. Without thinking, he turned and ran, carrying the alien woman in his arms, the chain still dangling from her limbs. He was faster than he had expected. Adrenaline pushing him forward, the sound of the train's horn so loud now that it seemed to shake the earth beneath him. Just as he reached a bend in the tracks, he dove to the side, rolling into a small ditch, pulling the woman down with him. The train roared past, mere inches away from them. Jack's heart pounded in his chest, and for a moment he was too stunned to move. The sound of the train faded into the distance, and Jack sat up slowly, his breath ragged. The alien woman in his arms stirred again. Her eyes were wide, filled with confusion, pain, and something else. Something like gratitude, but tinged with fear. "I don't know who you are," she whispered, her voice hoarse, "but you just saved my life." Jack didn't know what to say. He didn't feel like a hero. He had just done what anyone would have done in his place, right? But as he looked at her, something told him this wasn't the end. This wasn't just a simple rescue. She wasn't just an alien who needed saving. There was something more to this story, something he couldn't yet understand. "You're safe now," Jack said quietly. "I don't know what you're running from, but you're not alone anymore." But Lyra, the alien woman, stared at him for a long moment, her green eyes searching his face. "I don't belong here," she said softly, "and neither do you." Jack could feel his heart still racing as he sat there, cradling the alien woman in his arms. Her delicate frame was trembling, and her breathing was shallow but steady now. The soft light from her glowing skin faded slightly, her energy clearly drained. As much as he had hoped for a quick escape from the tracks, Jack wasn't sure what to do next. He didn't know anything about the woman he had just saved, who she was, where she came from, or what dangers she was facing. But there was one thing he was certain of. She was in danger, and somehow, by some twist of fate, he had become part of her fight for survival. She winced as she tried to move, her chains still hanging loosely from her wrists. Jack carefully lifted her up, helping her sit up in the ditch. The night was cold, and a harsh wind blew across the barren landscape, making the shadows dance on the rocky ground. The train's distant sound had faded, but the sense of danger still hung in the air. He could almost feel the weight of an invisible presence, as if something or someone was watching them. She glanced at him, her green eyes shining with an intensity that made Jack uncomfortable. "You saved me," she said again, her voice quieter now. "But I can't stay here. They'll find me. They'll find both of us." Jack didn't have any answers. He just knew they needed to move, to get away from the tracks. The train had passed, but that didn't mean they were safe. It only meant that they had a small window of time, a brief moment when the world might forget about them before the real danger caught up. "Who will find you?" Jack asked, trying to keep his voice calm, despite the chaos swirling in his mind. "Who's after you?" For a moment she looked lost, like she wasn't sure how much she should tell him. Her fingers lightly grazed the chain still hanging around her wrist. She seemed to be lost in thought, her mind far away. I don't have time to explain everything," she whispered. "But they're powerful. They've already branded me a traitor. If they catch me, I'll be dead. But if they catch you—" She trailed off, her voice growing softer. "I don't want you to get hurt because of me." Jack's mind raced. He didn't understand. Who would want to hurt someone so clearly vulnerable? But her words carried a weight that he couldn't ignore. She was being hunted by something, or someone dangerous, and now he was caught in the middle of it. The thought of letting her go, of leaving her to face whatever was after her alone, didn't sit well with him. He hadn't saved her just to walk away. "Then we'll leave," Jack said firmly, helping her to her feet. "We'll figure this out together." The woman's eyes widened in surprise. For a moment, Jack thought she might protest, but instead, She nodded slowly, her expression serious. "My name is Lyra," she said quietly. "I didn't ask for your help, but I'm grateful. You don't know what you've done, Jack. I don't know how to thank you." "Just stay safe," Jack muttered, not entirely sure what he was saying. He wasn't looking for thanks, he wasn't a hero. He was just a man who'd gotten caught up in something far bigger than himself. But now that he was in this, he wasn't about to back out. The first step was finding somewhere to hide. Jack had lived in the colony long enough to know the terrain, and he had an idea of where to go. There was a small abandoned house on the outskirts, a place no one used. It was far from the main settlement, hidden enough that it would offer them some protection, at least for the time being. With Lyra still unsteady on her feet, Jack helped her walk, his eyes scanning the dark surroundings for any signs of danger. Every shadow seemed to hold something ominous, every rustle in the wind was a warning. It felt like they were being watched. They moved quickly, Jack's mind racing. The colony wasn't far, but it wasn't close either. He knew that if Lyra was being hunted, staying in the colony would only make it easier for her pursuers to find them. The abandoned house was their best chance. As they walked, Jack tried to make sense of everything. Lyra was an alien. That was obvious. But the strange thing was how human she looked, despite her glowing skin. She wasn't like the alien creatures Jack had heard about in stories. She was more than that. She was something different, something special. And now she was a fugitive. "What did you do?" Jack asked, unable to stop himself. The question had been nagging at him ever since he had found her on the tracks. "Why are they after you? What did you uncover?" Lyra's face tightened at the question, her eyes clouding with a mixture of anger and fear. She stopped walking for a moment, staring off into the distance as though the memory was too painful to face. Then she sighed, her shoulders slumping. "I was a part of something bigger than I ever realized," she said quietly. "I was a soldier for my planet's military forces. We were trained for battle, for conquest. But I began to see the truth. What they were planning wasn't just about protecting our people. It was about taking everything from others." Jack listened carefully, but the more she spoke, the less he understood. "Conquest? What does that mean?" Lyra looked back at him, her face hardening with determination. "We were going to invade other worlds, other civilizations. I couldn't stand by and let that happen. So I tried to stop it. But when I went to my superiors, they turned on me. They branded me a traitor and tried to silence me." A chill ran through Jack as he realized just how dangerous her situation was. "So you're not just running from someone, you're running from an entire army?" She nodded. "They want me dead. I know too much." The weight of her words hit Jack like a ton of bricks. This was bigger than he had imagined, and now, it was bigger than him. With no time to lose, they pressed on, the abandoned house now only a few miles away. The shadows grew darker, but Jack's mind was clear. He had made a choice when he saved Lyra. Now it was time to face the consequences of that choice. But no matter what happened next, Jack knew one thing for certain. His life would never be the same again. The small abandoned house was hidden on the outskirts of the colony, tucked between a cluster of dead trees that had long since lost their leaves. It was a dilapidated structure, its wooden walls creaking with every gust of wind. The windows were covered with grime, and the door was barely hanging on its hinges. But to Jack, it was the perfect place to hide, remote, forgotten, and far away from any prying eyes. As they approached the house, Jack felt the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He had saved Lyra from certain death, and now he was taking her to a place where they would both be in danger. It was a decision that didn't sit well with him, but at the same time there was no turning back. He had already crossed the line, and now he was tangled in a mess far bigger than he could have imagined. Lyra seemed less nervous now, her energy returning slowly, though she still leaned heavily on him as they made their way to the door. Her once bright glow had dimmed, and Jack wondered how much longer she would last before the toll of her injuries caught up with her. When they entered the house, the air was stale and thick with dust. The floorboards creaked under their weight as they moved through the rooms. There was no furniture, only a few broken pieces of wood and shattered glass scattered on the floor. The house looked like it hadn't been lived in for years. Jack set Lyra down in a corner, far from the windows. He closed the door behind them, locking it with a rusty bolt that barely worked. Outside, the wind howled, making the house feel even more isolated. For a moment, there was silence. Lyra sat against the wall, her eyes scanning the room. She seemed lost in thought, her face hard and unreadable. Jack didn't know what to say, but he couldn't just sit there and do nothing. The tension between them hung in the air like a thick fog. He cleared his throat. "We're safe here for now," Jack said, trying to sound reassuring. "We'll figure out what to do next." Lyra didn't respond at first. She was staring at the ground, her fingers tracing the lines in the old wood floor. Then, slowly, she looked up at him, her green eyes still glowing faintly in the dim light. "You saved me," she said softly, her voice low and almost broken. "I don't understand why. But you did." Jack frowned, not entirely sure how to answer. He had saved her because he couldn't just leave her to die. It wasn't anything heroic, it was just the right thing to do. Or at least, that's what he told himself. "I didn't want you to die out there," Jack said quietly. "It's as simple as that." Lyra's gaze softened for a moment, and Jack caught a glimpse of something he hadn't seen before. Vulnerability. She wasn't the powerful soldier she had been moments ago. She was just a woman, broken and scared, caught in something she couldn't control. "I was trained to fight," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I was taught to fight for my people, to protect them. But now, I don't even know who I'm fighting for anymore." Jack watched her, feeling the weight of her words. He didn't understand her world, didn't know what it was like to be a soldier, to be part of something larger than himself. But in that moment, he understood what it meant to feel lost, to not know who to trust or what to believe in. They were both in this mess together, and neither of them knew where it would lead. "Why did you try to stop them?" Jack asked, his curiosity getting the better of him. "The people you worked for. What were they planning?" Lyra hesitated for a long time before answering. Her eyes seemed distant, like she was reliving a memory too painful to face. "They wanted to invade other planets," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "They were planning to take over entire civilizations, to destroy them, and I couldn't be part of it. I couldn't stand by and watch innocent lives be wiped out." Jack felt a chill crawl up his spine as he processed her words. It was more than just war, it was the kind of destruction that left nothing behind. How could anyone, any civilization, justify such a thing? "But you're still alive," Jack said, his voice filled with awe and fear. "You stopped them, didn't you? You exposed their plans?" Lyra shook her head slowly. "I tried, but they turned on me. They framed me for crimes I didn't commit. And now they want me dead. They can't let me live, not with what I know." Jack didn't know how to respond. He couldn't imagine what it must have been like to fight against your own people, to go from being their trusted soldier to being hunted like an animal. It was a nightmare, and yet Lyra was still here, still alive, even if it didn't feel like victory. "How do you know they're still after you?" Jack asked, his voice low with concern. "What makes you so sure they won't just forget about you?" Lyra's eyes darkened and she glanced out the cracked window. The wind rattled the old shutters, but she seemed to hear something else. Something Jack couldn't. Her gaze was sharp, like she could sense something in the distance, something he couldn't see. "They won't stop," she said, her voice steady and cold. "I've escaped before, but they always find me. They know where I am. And they'll be coming for me again. And they'll come for you, too." Jack's blood ran cold. He hadn't thought about the consequences of his actions. He hadn't considered the danger of sheltering someone like Lyra. The realization hit him hard. He had unknowingly walked into a war he didn't understand. He had become part of something, much larger than himself. But as Lyra met his gaze, something strange happened. Despite the fear, Despite the uncertainty of what lay ahead, Jack felt a connection, a bond between them. She wasn't just a stranger anymore. She was someone who had trusted him, someone whose life he had saved, and no matter how much danger that put him in, he couldn't turn away. "I won't let them take you," Jack said firmly, standing up. "I don't care who they are, I'll protect you." Lyra studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then she nodded slowly. "You don't have to do this," she said, her voice softer now. "But thank you." For the first time since they had met, Jack felt like he was doing something that mattered. He wasn't just running from his past or hiding in the shadows of a forgotten world. He was standing up for something, for someone who needed him, and that meant more than he had ever realized. The road ahead would be dangerous, filled with unknowns and challenges. But for now, in the dim light of the abandoned house, Jack and Lyra had one thing in their favor: hope. And that was a weapon they could hold on to, even in the face of darkness. The days in the abandoned house seemed to blur together. Jack had grown used to the quiet, if you could call it that. The wind howled outside, rattling the old walls, but inside, everything felt still, almost suffocating. Lyra remained mostly silent, lost in her thoughts, her body still recovering from the trauma she had suffered. Her glow was faint, but it wasn't just physical exhaustion that drained her. There was something else, an invisible weight pressing down on her, something that refused to let her truly rest. Jack did what he could to make the house livable, gathering what little food he could find in nearby ruins. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep them going. He also kept a close eye on the road leading to the house, always alert for any sign of movement. The haunting reality of Lyra's enemies coming for them never left his mind. She had told him that they would stop at nothing to find her, and, with each passing day, Jack grew more anxious, more fearful that the storm was closing in on them. One evening, as Jack sat by the small fire in the corner of the room, Lyra finally spoke. Her voice was weak but steady, as if she had made up her mind to reveal something she had kept hidden for too long. "Jack," she began, her eyes glistening with a mixture of exhaustion and something deeper, something painful. "There's more you need to know. About me. And why they want me dead." Jack turned his attention to her immediately. He had been expecting this moment. The moment when Lyra would finally open up about her past. He had seen the way she avoided his questions, the way she hesitated before speaking about anything of importance. But now it seemed like the time had come for her to tell him the truth. He set his cup down, the warm drink forgotten, and leaned in, his attention fully on her. "You don't have to tell me if you're not ready," he said softly. "But if you want to, I'm listening." Lyra's gaze flickered to the flickering flames of the fire, her face illuminated in the dim light. For a moment she was silent, as if weighing her next words carefully. Then, finally, she spoke again. "I wasn't just a soldier, Jack. I wasn't just a pawn in their war machine. I was part of their inner circle. I was one of their highest-ranking officers, trusted to lead and make decisions for the military, but I didn't always believe in what we were doing. It took me a long time to realize the truth." She paused, swallowing hard, her hands trembling slightly as she clasped them together. Jack's heart tightened as he watched her struggle with the words. There was a deep pain in her voice, and he couldn't help but wonder how long she had been carrying this burden. We weren't just preparing for war. We were planning something worse, something no one could have imagined," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "My government, my people, wanted to conquer every planet in our path. And it wasn't just about resources or territory. It was about wiping out entire civilizations. We wanted to enslave others, use them for our gain, and we were willing to destroy anyone who stood in our way." Jack could hardly breathe. The shock of her words hit him like a blow. He had never imagined that something so evil was behind her escape, behind the hunt for her life. He had always seen Lyra as a victim, a woman who had been betrayed. But Hearing her talk about her involvement in such a plan was something else entirely. "I was a part of that plan, Jack," she said quietly, her eyes staring into the fire. "I led missions, took part in strategic attacks. I was the one who decided where and when we would strike. I thought I was doing what was best for my people, but the more I saw, the more I realized how wrong it all was, how much suffering we were causing. I couldn't be a part of it anymore. I had to stop it." Jack's mind raced, trying to process everything. He hadn't expected this kind of truth, and it shook him. Lyra had been part of a regime that had planned to destroy innocent lives. She had been a part of that violence. But now, here she was, running from the same system she had once helped build. "And what happened after that?" Jack asked quietly, his voice tinged with curiosity and concern. "How did they find out? How did you become their enemy?" Lyra's face tightened with anger. She clenched her fists, the memory still fresh in her mind. "I tried to expose the truth. I tried to go to our leaders to tell them what was happening. I thought if I could stop the plan from unfolding, I could save countless lives, but they didn't want to hear it. They saw me as a threat. They saw my loyalty as something that could no longer be trusted." She stood up abruptly, her eyes burning with intensity. "They labeled me a traitor, a spy, a rebel. And once that happened, there was no going back. They branded me as someone who was willing to destroy my own people. And so they turned on me. They framed me for crimes I didn't commit, Jack. They blamed me for everything, every death, every attack." Jack was stunned. "You were trying to stop it," he said, more to himself than to her, "and they turned on you for it." Lyra nodded bitterly. "They made me the scapegoat. They needed someone to blame, someone to take the fall for their plans. And I was the one they chose, but it wasn't just me they wanted gone. They needed to make an example out of me, to show everyone what happened to those who questioned the government. And now I'm a fugitive, and they will stop at nothing to hunt me down." Jack stood up, his own anger rising. The injustice of it all, the betrayal Lyra had suffered, filled him with a sense of helplessness. "But you didn't deserve any of it," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "You were trying to stop them, you were trying to save lives." Lyra looked at him, a faint, almost sad smile on her lips. "I didn't know who I was until it was too late, Jack. I didn't understand what I was a part of. But now, I know what I have to do. I have to make this right." The silence between them stretched for a moment, thick with unspoken words. Jack could see the determination in Lyra's eyes, but there was also something else, something that made her appear more vulnerable than ever before. She wasn't just a soldier anymore. She was a woman trying to atone for her past mistakes. And in that moment, Jack realized that the battle she was fighting wasn't just one of survival. It was a battle for redemption. "I'm with you," Jack said quietly. "Whatever happens next, we do it together." Lyra's eyes softened, her guard finally lowering. She took a deep breath and nodded, the weight of everything she had been carrying still heavy on her shoulders. "Together," she agreed, her voice barely audible. And for the first time, Jack felt like they were truly allies, partners in a fight that neither of them fully understood yet, but one they were ready to face. The nights grew colder in the abandoned house. The once small flickers of light from Lyra's body had now become almost non-existent, a faint glow that barely illuminated her face in the dark. Jack could see the toll the endless days on the run were taking on her. Every movement seemed to drain her, every breath heavier than the last. The weight of her past, the knowledge that her own people were hunting her, hung over them both like a thick cloud. But it wasn't just Lyra who felt the pressure. Jack felt it too, the weight of the decisions he had made. He had saved her life. He had promised to help her. And now, with each passing day, he realized just how far they were from safety. He hadn't been able to protect her before when she had been left on the tracks, but now that she was with him, he wouldn't make that mistake again. But the truth was, Jack was running out of ideas. They were hiding in plain sight. They had no allies. And Lyra's enemies were growing closer. One night, as the wind howled and the darkness pressed in from all sides, Jack stood by the broken window, looking out into the distance. The colony wasn't far, but it was far enough that he didn't feel entirely exposed. Still, something gnawed at him, something primal. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that someone out there knew exactly where they were. He tried to ignore it, but the feeling wouldn't go away. It wasn't just paranoia. It was a sense of certainty. "What are you thinking?" Lyra's voice cut through the silence, as soft as a whisper, but her words held weight. She was standing behind him, her figure a shadow in the room, her eyes fixed on him. Jack turned, startled, but quickly recovered. "Just thinking about how long we can keep hiding here." Lyra's face was grim, her green eyes steady. She had recovered some strength, but not enough to trust herself yet. The glow had returned, just a little, like a dying ember. Still, it wasn't enough to shield them from what was coming. "We can't keep hiding forever, Jack," she said quietly. "Sooner or later they'll find us, they always do." Jack's heart tightened at the cold certainty in her voice. It wasn't a question, it was a fact. And he knew it was true. Lyra's enemies weren't just searching for her. They were hunting her. He didn't know who they were, but he had seen the ruthlessness in her eyes when she spoke of them. They were powerful. They had resources, and they had no mercy. "So, what do we do?" Jack asked, trying to steady his voice. He was asking for a plan, something to give him a sense of control. But the truth was, he didn't know how to stop what was coming. He didn't even know where to start. Lyra didn't answer right away. She took a slow step forward, her movements deliberate, as though carefully considering every word she spoke. "We don't have much time. They'll know we're here soon. The longer we wait, the harder it will be to escape." Jack's chest tightened. "Then we leave." "We can't stay here any longer," she shook her head. "It's not enough to run. They'll track us. They'll always find us if we just keep running, no matter where we go." Jack's mind raced. He had been thinking of escaping, just running away. But the reality of the situation hit him harder than before. They couldn't just flee forever. They needed a plan. They needed to fight back somehow. But how? "We have to take the fight to them," Lyra said, as if reading his mind. Her eyes flickered with a dangerous spark, the old fire that had once burned brightly within her. "I've been running for too long. It's time to stop hiding. It's time to show them that I'm not just a target, I'm a threat." Jack studied her, unsure of what she meant. "But you're not fully healed. You're not even at full strength." "I don't need to be," she answered, her voice firm. "I've faced worse, and I'll face them again." The confidence in her words sent a chill through Jack. He had seen Lyra's strength. He had witnessed her fight to survive, to escape. But he hadn't seen her fight this battle before. The battle within herself. It was clear now. Lyra wasn't just trying to escape her past, she was trying to reclaim it. To stop the machine she had once been part of from destroying others. "What are you suggesting?" Jack asked, though he was already beginning to understand. "There's a place," Lyra said. "A facility that holds everything. Everything my people have planned. Everything they've done." She paused, her eyes hardening. "If we destroy it, we destroy their ability to track me, to destroy me, and maybe, just maybe, we can stop them." Jack's mind reeled. He had no idea what kind of place she was talking about, but he could see the determination in her eyes. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about taking the fight to the heart of her enemies. But the idea terrified him. Destroying a powerful facility wasn't a small task. It would put them directly in the path of the people who wanted to see Lyra dead. "Are you sure?" Jack asked. "This sounds like a suicide mission." Lyra's eyes met his, and for a long moment, there was nothing but quiet between them. Then, with quiet intensity, she said, "It's the only way." Jack could feel the weight of her words. They had no allies, no army to back them. It was just the two of them, facing a system much larger and more powerful than they had ever imagined. But Jack had seen what Lyra was capable of. He had seen the fire that still burned within her, the woman who had fought to protect others, even when her own people had turned on her. And in that moment, Jack made his decision. "Then we'll do it," he said, his voice steady. "We'll take them down. Together." Lyra looked at him, her expression unreadable for a moment. Then she nodded, a small but determined smile playing at the corners of her lips. "Together," she repeated softly. And in that moment, Jack realized that this wasn't just a fight for survival anymore. It wasn't just about escaping from the past. This was a fight for their future, for everything they had left to lose. The night before their mission was the longest night of Jack's life. Every minute felt like an eternity as they prepared for the most dangerous thing either of them had ever attempted. The weight of the plan loomed over them, and the silence in the abandoned house was thick, almost suffocating. They had made their decision. There was no going back now. Jack couldn't sleep. He sat near the fire, watching the flames flicker as his mind raced. The facility Lyra had mentioned was heavily guarded, an underground fortress where the leaders of her former government held their most classified operations. It was where the plans to invade and conquer the neighboring planets had been formed. It was the heart of the empire she had once been a part of, and they were about to destroy it. Lyra had told him everything she knew about the facility. It wasn't just a military base. It was a network of high-tech weapons, communication systems, and databases. If they succeeded in taking it down, they would cripple the government's power, severing their ability to track her and prevent them from further destruction. But the facility was built like a fortress. Getting in wouldn't be easy. And getting out? That would be even harder. Jack couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into the lion's den. The closer they got to the mission, the more he questioned if it was worth the risk. What if they failed? What if Lyra died, or worse, what if he couldn't protect her? He looked over at her. She was resting, her body still healing from the long ordeal. The faint glow that had returned to her skin was dim again. She was exhausted, physically and emotionally, but there was something in her eyes, a quiet determination that never wavered. She was ready for this. "We'll make it out," she had told him earlier, her voice steady, though her expression was weary. "We have to, for all the people who didn't have a chance." For a moment, Jack thought of the life he had left behind, the simple life he had tried to build, the quiet days of routine in the colony. It had all felt so insignificant now, as if everything he had known before had been a distraction. The real battle wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about fighting for a future. The next morning, they set out just before dawn. The sun had yet to rise, and the cold air bit at their skin as they made their way toward the facility. They were deep in the heart of enemy territory now. They had no backup, no reinforcements. It was just the two of them, relying on Lyra's knowledge of the facility and Jack's determination to see this through. The closer they got, the more the air seemed to change. Every step felt like a countdown to something inevitable, like they were walking into the jaws of a trap. They could hear the distant hum of machines, the low rumble of heavy vehicles moving around the facility. It was alive with activity, preparing for something, preparing for their arrival perhaps. As they reached the outer perimeter, Jack could feel his heart pounding in his chest. Lyra moved with quiet precision, her every step calculated and purposeful. She was leading the way now, taking him through the maze of security, dodging patrols, and slipping through gaps in the facility's defenses like a ghost. It was then that Jack realized something he hadn't fully understood before. Lyra wasn't just a soldier. She was a survivor. Every move she made was carefully planned, every detail accounted for. She had been trained to do this, to fight, to escape, and to win. They reached the entrance of the facility, a massive steel door guarded by two heavily armed soldiers. Lyra paused, her eyes narrowing as she assessed the situation. "We'll Need to disable their security systems first, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I know the codes, but we'll have to move quickly. Jack nodded, his hand resting on the weapon he had taken from a previous encounter, a blaster he had learned to use out of necessity. He wasn't a soldier, but he had picked up enough to hold his own. They couldn't afford mistakes. With a swift motion, Lyra tapped into the facility's control panel, her fingers moving quickly across the interface. The door's security systems flickered, then powered down, granting them access. They slipped inside, entering a long hallway lined with high-tech equipment and glowing screens. The facility felt like a heartbeat, a machine in motion, the pulse of an empire. But it was also vulnerable. There were blind spots, gaps in the system that Lyra knew how to exploit, and that's what they were going to do. As they moved deeper into the heart of the facility, they could hear the muffled sound of footsteps in the distance, guards likely. Lyra motioned for Jack to follow her into a small maintenance room. They ducked behind a stack of crates, their breath shallow as they waited. Jack's mind raced. He had never done anything like this before. He was used to simple tasks, working on the colony, fixing things, staying out of trouble. Now, he was breaking into an enemy stronghold on the verge of destroying it. There was no turning back. Suddenly, the room filled with the sound of alarms. Red lights flashed and the floor shook as a heavy door slammed shut behind them. Lyra's eyes widened in alarm. They know we're here, she said, urgency in her voice. They've activated the lockdown. We've got minutes before they secure the entire facility. Before Jack could react, Lyra was already moving, her mind set on the task ahead. She rushed to the control panel, her fingers flying over the buttons. A few seconds later, she smiled grimly. We're in, she said, looking up at Jack. It's time to destroy this place. With a single determined step, Lyra activated the facility's self-destruct sequence. The countdown began. The entire place trembled as the explosion countdown initiated. Jack could feel the ground beneath him vibrate, the hum of the system slowly building to a crescendo. It was their only chance. They had to get out now. Run! Lyra shouted. They sprinted through the corridors, dodging guards who had begun to swarm the area. Every second felt like an eternity as they navigated the labyrinth of hallways and rooms. The countdown was ticking down. Just as they reached the exit, an explosion rocked the facility. The ground shook and dust filled the air. The walls around them cracked and fire began to spread. Jack grabbed Lyra's arm, pulling her toward the escape hatch. They jumped just as the facility erupted behind them, a massive explosion ripping through the building. The shockwave pushed them forward, but they kept running, pushing their bodies to the limit. Outside, the sky was beginning to lighten, the first rays of dawn breaking through the clouds. The sound of the explosion faded, replaced by the quiet hum of the world around them. They had done it. They had taken down the heart of the empire, and in doing so, they had given themselves and countless others a chance at freedom. As they collapsed against a rocky outcrop, gasping for breath, Jack looked at Lyra. She was covered in dust, her face streaked with grime, but there was a fire in her eyes. It wasn't just survival anymore. It was a victory, a small one, but a victory nonetheless. You did it, Jack said, his voice full of awe. Lyra smiled, a genuine, tired smile. We did it, she corrected softly, and for the first time since they had met, Jack truly believed that anything was possible. Together they had torn down the walls that had imprisoned her, and in doing so had set themselves free.